The Mexican government denies that there are irregularities into its investigation into the Ayotzinapa case. Plus, a Nobel laureate says a coup is underway in Brazil. Thanks so much for joining us for teleSur's English. I'm Coddy Weddle, and this is From the South. The Mexican government has refuted the final report presented by the OAS appointed group of independent experts. The director of the Criminal Investigation Unit of the Attorney General's Office, Tomás Zerón, defended the process, which the independents denounced as plagued with irregularities. Zerón argued that the investigation has always been public and transparent. The independent group of experts, however, presented the irregularities in their final report, claiming evidence was planted. With more now, our correspondent Clayton Kahn reports.
With only 48 hours left in their mandate, the group of experts sharply responded to Mexico's director of the Criminal Investigation Agency, Tomás Zerón. Zerón had argued the legality of carrying out forensic analysis of the San Juan River crime scene in Guerrero a day before it was officially registered and publicly announced.
A crime scene that has been processed, as you all saw in the video presented by Mr. Tomás Zerón on October 28, 2014, should have been registered, even more so if the crime scene is what produces results on October 29, 2014.
According to the official case file, the location was investigated due to the confession given by presumed organized crime member Agustín García Reyes. Zerón personally accompanied the accused to the location where the government affirms bone fragments and ashes were collected. However, according to an official medical revision, after his arrest, García Reyes presented 30 lesions on his body.
He tells the psychologist that he was tortured, that they put a bag on his head, that they beat him, and that they gave him electric shocks.
In their final report on the Ayotzinapa case, the independent experts determined that of the 120 arrested thus far in the case, at least 17 showed signs of torture, including 5 individuals who reportedly provided crucial information or confessions.
The fruit from the poison tree, and all that comes from that poison tree, here in this case the confession, under torture, is invalid.
Although the Attorney General's office said it was beginning an internal investigation related to the allegations of torture, Tomás Zerón argued that the irregularities in securing the San Juan River crime scene and the lack of official documentation or transparency was due to a lack of resources.
Dada la urgencia con la que fueron llamados los peritos.
They were not carrying the right equipment. All they did was recognition of the place and its conditions, and requirements to plan the following proceedings, which the Federation's Attorney General instructed to perform the next day.
Realizar al día siguiente.
Meanwhile, the families of the disappeared 43 Ayotzinapa students and their supporters believe the government ultimately seeks to minimize the findings of the independent experts and close the case.
I think that the government is betting on this last stretch to produce all the conditions to foster closing the case. That is our fear, but as you can see, I believe the experts have placed for us now a series of elements on the table and a series of investigative lines that are impossible to avoid.
Both the experts and the families have called for an impartial investigation of those authorities who may be involved in manipulating evidence in the Ayotzinapa case, as well as for the formalization of a follow-up mechanism so that independent oversight may continue beyond the end of the experts' mandate. Clayton Kahn, teleSur, Mexico City.
And evidence contradicting the government and confirming the experts' report keeps on emerging. A new tape published by the popular investigative journalist Carmen Aristegui shows what seems to be members of the prosecutor's office planting evidence at the scene where authorities claim to have found the remains of the 43 Ayotzinapa students. The video was part of the investigation of the prosecutor's office and was leaked to the journalist. The footage seems to confirm the claims made by the expert group. Meanwhile, journalists staged a protest demanding the right to freedom of expression in Mexico. The organizers wanted to raise awareness about the dire security situation being faced by colleagues throughout the country. You'll remember, Mexico is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for journalists. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff has vowed to fight the impeachment process against her. The president, speaking at a human rights forum, said that there was no evidence of any corruption or wrongdoing by herself. Rousseff further accused the opposition of launching a coup against her.
There are several ways of staging a coup. You can use weapons, you can use tanks, But there's a new kind of coup, which can be perpetrated with clean hands by tearing apart the Constitution.
And Rousseff was backed by Nobel Peace Prize laureate Adolfo Perez Esquivel. The Argentinian activist explained that a soft coup was underway in Brazil. Perez Esquivel compared the current impeachment process in Brazil to the political trials against ousted Presidents Manuel Zelaya from Honduras and Fernando Lugo from Paraguay. Both of those presidents were removed in swift impeachment processes led by an opposition majority in their respective parliaments. Heavy rains in Guatemala have caused a huge pile of trash to collapse in the country's largest garbage dump. At least 4 people have died, all of them trash collectors. Another 8 people were hurt. The incident has caused concern among the population over the poor waste management system there in the country. The Venezuelan government has accused the political opposition of promoting violence after clashes and looting took place in the western city of Maracaibo. The local government of Maracaibo revealed that there is evidence that these incidents were being financed by opposition groups to generate chaos. At least 120 people have been arrested so far as investigations continue. Bolivia delivered 90 tons of aid, which included food and medicines, to the survivors of Ecuador's 7.8 magnitude earthquake. The aid was delivered during President Evo Morales' visit to the country's coastal areas that were most affected by the earthquake. Now, Bolivia has also sent rescue teams and promised to continue helping in the recovery of the areas. Airstrikes destroyed a Doctors Without Borders hospital in a rebel-held area of Syria's Aleppo, killing at least 27 people. Among the victims of the attacks were 3 children and the city's last pediatrician. The MSF has condemned the attack and demanded an investigation.
Directly an MSF hospital, our position, of course, is the position of outrage and profound condemnation. It's absolutely, it cannot be admitted that a fully functional medical facility in the middle of a war, taking care of the most vulnerable, is hit as a result of a military action. Our position is of absolute outrage and condemnation of this attack.
In the U.S., 3 people connected to the San Bernardino attacker, Saeed Rizwan Farouk, have been arrested over alleged marriage fraud. Now, they are Farouk's brother and sister-in-law and the wife of Enrique Marquez Jr., who is a friend of Farouk's. Marquez faces charges himself in relation to the attack that left 14 people dead in December of 2015. An appeal hearing has begun for Captain Francesco Schettino in Italy. Now, he was held responsible for the Costa Concordia cruise ship disaster that was in 2012 that killed 32 people. Schettino was sentenced to 16 years in jail in 2015. He was found guilty of manslaughter, causing a maritime accident, and abandoning ship. While Schettino is trying to overturn the sentence, the prosecution is seeking to extend his conviction. The British Labour Party has suspended former London Mayor Ken Livingstone for anti-Semitic remarks. During a BBC interview, Livingstone said Hitler supported Zionism before he, quote, went mad. Those were his words. Livingstone said he was not suggesting Hitler was a Zionist. He claimed to be quoting historical facts. Police fired tear gas at demonstrators as protests turned violent in several French cities. Tens of thousands of workers and students are protesting against a hotly contested labor bill. The demonstrations, as well as work stoppages, were the latest actions in a protest wave that began 2 months ago. Italian police have arrested 4 people suspected of planning to carry out an attack in Italy and conspiring to join the Islamic State group. Now, police also issued arrest warrants for 2 fugitives there, a Moroccan man and his Italian wife, who left Italy and headed towards Iraq and Syria in 2015 as part of the same investigation. China has passed a controversial law imposing tough restrictions on foreign non-government organizations. Campaigners attacked the move, saying it represented a severe blow to the non-profit groups involved in issues such as the environment, public health, as well as human rights. Israeli occupation forces have killed a Palestinian pregnant woman and her brother at a military checkpoint outside of Jerusalem. For more now, we turn to our correspondent there, Noor Harazin.
Israeli occupation forces on Wednesday fatally shot dead a 5-month pregnant Palestinian woman and her teenage brother at the Qalandia checkpoint between Ramallah and the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Palestinian sources identified the siblings as Maram Abu Ismail, 23, and Ibrahim Taha, 16. Official sources close to the victims said Maram and her younger brother were on their way to Jerusalem for a medical appointment. An Israeli police statement, however, said a woman and her companion approached a vehicle's only line holding knives and walked rapidly towards police guards at the checkpoint. The two were asked to stop several times, but they kept advancing, and police officers had to neutralize them. However, eyewitnesses disputed this version of the story. A Palestinian bus driver who was present at the scene said that the two were apparently unfamiliar with the checkpoint procedures and the soldiers yelling in Hebrew.
This execution is a new crime added to a string of other crimes carried out by the Israeli occupation forces against Palestinians under the pretext of attempted attacks against their soldiers. These lawless executions in which our youths are killed without trial should be questioned by the international organizations, including the International Criminal Court.
Meanwhile, the Palestinian Ministry of Information described the killing in a statement as a brutal daylight crime. For their part, the Palestinian factions have called for revenge and escalated resistance against the occupation forces. Israel has killed at least 200 Palestinians, including attackers and protesters, since last October, most of whom were executed at military checkpoints on alleged suspicion of carrying out attempted stabbing attacks. Noor Harazin, teleSur's TV, Palestine.
U.S. Vice President Joe Biden made an unannounced visit to Iraq to support the government there amid the political crisis in the country. Biden's visit was also a sign of support for the Iraqi government in its fight against Islamic State militants. According to a senior administration official, Biden has close personal relationships with Iraqi leaders and speaks with them on average every 10 days. A suicide car bomb exploded outside the home of the police chief of Aden. This is the latest in a series of attacks against government officials in that city in Yemen. General Shalal Shayai escaped unharmed, but at least 2 people were wounded in the attack. A witness said the bomber was stopped at a checkpoint on the perimeter of a compound around the general's house when he blew himself up. International football star George Weah announced his plan to run in the Liberian presidential elections in 2016. This is his second bid for the post. Now, he was elected as senator for the western province of Montserrado in December 2014 after he defeated a son of the president. Lawyers representing some of the families of the 96 soccer fans crushed to death in the Hillsborough Stadium disaster in the 1980s have filed a civil suit against 2 British police forces. Now, the lawsuit alleges misuse of power in office and was revealed after an inquest earlier this week determined the fans were unlawfully killed. The suit was filed in 2015, but a high court order prevented publication of any information about it until the inquest had ended in order to avoid prejudicing the proceedings. Some 20 retired cabaret stars ranging in ages from 50 to 80 are starring alongside other younger performers in Cuba. They are performing in the show Encuentro, which opened this month at the National Theater in Havana. The performers prepared for their comeback for 3 months and are thrilled to be able to perform again. And that's what we're covering on this Thursday. Thanks so much for joining us. Plenty more on all of those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. Also, be sure to join us on social media. We'll see you back here tomorrow.